I've been called worse. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Qumulex Radio. I am Josh. This is my friend and coworker, Aaron. It is Thursday, so we're on schedule this week. Aaron was enjoying a delicious graham cracker, so we had to pause production and allow him to finish his snack.
That's right.
I'm healthy. I ate a pizza. I had pizza because I'm very healthy. So today, a topic that we wanted to cover is online trainings, and if online trainings should replace in-person training, which I think is a pretty interesting topic. So for anybody that follows this closely, you are probably assuming that I am biased, as I have my name and my voice on a lot of online training for Qumulex. But as usually, I'm going to kick it off to Aaron. If you want to give us your thoughts on this subject.
Yeah, sure. I think it really revolves around what type of product that you're working with. For example, just kind of speaking to access control, that is something that can be rather difficult to, conduct training virtually. However, I've seen it done very well. There's a company I worked for in the past. They had a virtual emulator that actually simulated panels and inputs and outputs, and you could actually build logic against it. And it was so well crafted. It literally replaced in-person training. But I'll throw a caveat in there. I would say as great as it was, it still kind of left you missing that experience of actually putting your hands on the equipment, experiencing what the different modules do, how to wire them up. And then, ultimately ask questions. So sure, this online portal, gave you the ability to ask questions, that you would get a response for, a few hours later. But I think it kind of, you lose that kind of like, spontaneous, those spontaneous questions that come up in the course of the training. And there's definitely some value to it. I would say, to check a box and say that you have an online training is very important, especially as self-paced training, just because today I think it's getting harder and harder to convince, from a manufacturer's perspective, it's getting harder to convince partners to, pull time out of their schedules to then hop on an airplane and meet you right. to attend these in person. I still say there's use cases out there, but, they're far and few between. And in fact, what I'm really kind of seeing those transition to are, customer related trainings after the product's been installed. The partner will facilitate the manufacturer coming in, doing the hands-on training, maybe even against that, customer system. They still will bring a plethora of hardware in person, to kind of demonstrate against, but for the most part, it's being conducted on their live production system. But, to kind of pull that conversation back just a little bit, I went down the rabbit hole. It relies on it greatly depends on the product that the training's for. Like, for example, video management systems, I think, are relatively simple and intuitive, and they don't require a whole lot of hands-on training like an access control platform would. So yeah, I think you can get away with a little bit more than you can with that element without the access piece. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What's your experience?
I think it's a cost versus benefit analysis, really. I think, first of all, I don't remember what subject we were covering. We've had so many of these. This is like our seventh. How could I remember all seven? But we had another topic where we were talking about, there's less people to hire. And yeah, it costs money. I mean, you're going to have to pay the person to go, they're not going to go for free. You're not going to tell them to take vacation time. So you're going to pay them while they travel and take this training, and you're going to be paying for the accommodations. You also have, opportunity cost, because that's now billable hours that you cannot produce as an integrator because you're making that investment. So the bill gets pretty big, pretty fast. And I mean, that's almost like a decision tree from like 15 years ago. I mean, now it's just like, can I even get them out there? Now it's like, okay, priority things are coming up a lot. There's certainly been some products. I think this is getting a lot better, but if you go back like a year and a half ago, when there were a lot of lead times on a lot of different products, products are kind of showing up and then you got to get out there and it's hard to schedule. So I think there's a lot more. I don't know if manufacturers, if we always understand, what it's like to be an integrator and just how impactful that is when you have to ship somebody out to go to a training. Heck, even if it's like an hour or two away and you drive, I mean, it's just, there's still a huge net effect there. And I think that's increased. So I guess my feeling would be, yeah, I mean, is the in-person better? It can be. I mean, how good is the trainer?
Right, absolutely.
I've been to some trainings and I don't want to name them or can't think of them right off the top of my head, but we've all been to trainings where you're like, I would literally rather wax my car today. Like, this is horrible. This person doesn't really know the answer to anything. They're just kind of reading the slides. They're not very engaged. I'm not really learning. I'm looking at my watch. And obviously I've had a lot of trainings where I'm like, wow, this is great. Like their enthusiasm is kind of contagious and it's very interesting. So you really, on top of everything, now you're counting on, does this person who you've traveled and taken time to go learn from, are they really a good educator? And you're starting to hope for a lot at that point. But I think if you have a really good one, you can make a case that you're getting a lot out of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of the things like, obviously we're going to continue to add to it, but recently we added the advanced access control training here, which will grow. But I think having that available, because you're pointing out where things get connected, why you would connect them, what they do. I mean, that's a resource for them in the field. They're not trying to take notes with them or try and remember what they learned in the class, but that's actually something they can just pull right up on YouTube.
Absolutely.
When they're on site.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe that's the last kicker for me is like, I think the needs are different now. It used to be, I would go to a training and I really had to learn it all during that training and try to remember. And if I didn't really have a lot of access to that training material to look anything up. And now there's a lot of things you can learn, like our training. I mean, we put it on the YouTube channel as a convenience to others. We don't charge if you want to go through and take the training, but if you just want to hop on YouTube on our channel and check for where we covered something in particular, installer could be right on site and pull that up and look at it. So I think it's getting harder to make a case, at least in our industry. I mean, I'm not talking about like my kids going to school or people going to university or, certain occupations. Obviously, I would prefer that all police officers go to an in-person academy and not do that online. But in security, I'm kind of running out of scenarios where I think that the cost benefit analysis makes as much sense. Like it almost seems like an excuse to charge is how it feels to me.
Right.
We run all these classes and, we're a big deal. If you want to sign up with us and sell our product, now you got to spend all this money and send somebody to this training. And it's kind of self-fulfilling because, if people leave or you hire new people, you may need to send others. So I would lean towards, I think it should be all online. I don't really, I think if you have an awesome instructor, it's a very complicated thing. Maybe, you can say it was better, but I don't think that's going to be a consistent result. I think it just makes it easier, and I think we are maybe experiencing or seeing a change where, I think our approach is more common now, which is to be more accessible. Rather than to come around and say, I don't know if you're special enough for Qumulex. We kind of come around and how can we fit with what you're doing? And, how can we benefit each other and have a good relationship instead of saying, well, I only have 1 or 2 per zip code. And how are you going to work your way into this? And I just think there's a change in how people do business as well.
So on that note, I was thinking about, some topics popped up in my head as you were speaking. So one of them is kind of
It's good. It's a
Foundational
podcast.
knowledge. Yeah, right. Foundational knowledge incorporated into training. I'm not seeing that as much as I used to. Like, for example, if we're talking about a VMS, it's, speaking towards, like angle of attack with cameras, what's, how many pixels on target are you getting? Like, you're actually doing these calculations to make yourself a better installer. I'm not seeing that as much anymore. It's been a long time since I've seen any kind of foundational knowledge built into a manufacturer's training program.
So I've been to an Axis training. It was a long time ago, but I think they got into some of that pixels on target and some of that discussion. Obviously, IPVM, if you have a membership there, they have a really good tool that will really help you understand that. But I don't think a lot of people really think about that now. I think they just put a camera in an area and they get relatively what they were expecting to get.
Sure.
It's kind of interesting. So, I mean, do you think that maybe that's because I guess maybe the cost of the cameras, they're far more affordable and you're running like UTP, like a Cat 5e or a Cat 6 instead of coax, and like it's a lot more affordable to wire up a new camera versus, because my feeling would be if I were a consultant, or if I was an A&E and I did specs for like larger projects like schools or other types of government facilities, you would definitely want to think from like a design perspective, like pixels on target and ensuring, that it was the right kind of camera, the right kind of lens, and what you're expecting to see in that field of view, and you'd want to define that.
Like, if your customer wants an LPR camera, it's up to you as the installer to make sure you're providing what they want. And if that entrance is, 80 feet away and the cars are coming by at 25 mile an hour, you need to kind of figure out what the best solution is going to be for that scenario. But
are most people thinking about that, or are they just putting an LPR camera in?
I think we're getting pretty lucky these days because, for example, like the technology that's available is, it's on a different tier than it once was. Like,
right.
Let's just say 5-6 short years ago, 2 megapixel was, the dominant player in the space in terms of camera technology. Now, it's 4K cameras. They're just as expensive as a 2K. You know what I mean? So people are putting these, I would call them greater technologies or higher resolution cameras out there, and then it gives you a little bit more leeway. Yeah, exactly. You're not so
more of an adjustment rather than whether it'll do it or not.
Right, exactly. Because now it's like you're not worried so much about how many pixels I'm getting on target, or how much clarity I'm getting out of the image at a particular zoom. I'm not so worried about the varifocal lens itself and what those settings are, and whether it's a 22 millimeter lens or what have you. It like, I think those factors are kind of out the window now. So you're getting away with a little bit more with the technology that we're using today. But I also wanted to make a point that I think that also, having now been experienced on the Qumulex side of building a training program, it's very cumbersome to build in that basic foundational knowledge into your training program, maybe even your certification program. You're kind of almost leading in with the assumption that the integrators and the people that we're doing business with know these topics.
So with the online training, there's no need for fluff. We didn't show up to an event and travel and fly. We're educating them on how the product works and what it can do and how to configure it and those types of things. I mean, are we saying that the online training is causing us to not maybe provide some of that foundational training like you mentioned? I feel attacked a little bit.
Oh, no, not at all.
I don't know that we've really covered that, but like, is one causing the other? Or, I mean, that's a really interesting question. This kind of went in a whole different direction with that. I mean,
sure.
Did they need to cover those things as frequently as they did? Or, did you have to have enough content to make sure that the flight or the drive was worth it?
Sure. I mean, I would.
But where are you getting that now? I mean, I guess on the job training.
You are, yeah. You typically will be
IPVM,
under a lead tech. Yeah, you'll
they
have
get into
different
all of
external
that.
training programs. Yeah,
I know that some of the Access training, not to plug anyone in particular, but I mean, I know that some of their trainings get into some of that, but I mean, I
yeah.
guess would there be like some of the as is training where
Sure,
you're
sure. I mean,
getting,
there's workshops, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, definitely, like you said, IPVM is a huge source for um, learning. I mean, in addition to that, manufacturers still produce technical documents. They still produce like, O&M manuals. They still produce
yeah,
installation manuals that definitely aid the technician in providing a resource for them. But yeah, I would say, it's definitely getting lost on the certification tracks for the various manufacturers, that component. But that was the point I was trying to make, because yeah, I mean, as far as an access control platform, we're not teaching people about areas and
but
things
we kind of
that would
expect that
pertain
you
to, yeah, exactly,
understand access control.
how
You just need to
person would
understand.
move throughout a building, going from area to area,
Yeah.
and all of these kind of very basic concepts where we're not doing. Yeah, but I feel like it's a very, you know I know there's churn. There's people who are, techs today, and then they're advancing, they're taking other roles, and then you have a
Mhm.
new generation of techs coming up. And yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what they're, um, are they just, is it pure on the job training where you're shadowing somebody these days? Is there a go-to source out there? Yeah, I'd be very curious to know, because I kind of had both tracks. I've had
Yeah.
the traditional in-class training as it related to gaining state certifications, to be an installer.
Sure. If you get into like fire alarm or intrusion
Absolutely.
in some
You're
areas,
going to learn the
requires
basic
licensing.
concepts through that. Yes, absolutely. But then there's other states that maybe don't
But
mandate
I don't
that.
feel like
So
they teach you how to install. I
no,
actually
they're not
had
going to
a
teach you how
fire
to.
alarm license a long time ago, and
They're just
it
going to
was
teach you the basics of
how
security,
high does the sounder have to be?
right?
The pull
They're going to teach you
station,
the
how many
differences
do you have
between the
to have?
technologies, and like, infrared, as it relates to like intrusion devices, things like
Yeah.
that. um they're going to get into all these various topics, from what I recall. But yeah, they're not going to teach you how to, mount again, going back to, like, if I had a Honeywell, motion detector, and this was a long range motion detector, and it was meant for a hallway type application.
Right.
I'm not going to, I think it's best practice, no matter who you are, to open up that manufacturer's document on the installation manual, and see what their best practices are, because they're going to have that information in there. They're going to have diagrams, they're going to have, all the information you would possibly need to install that product successfully. Um, and then of course, walk testing, and adjusting and what have you is always key. But
It's funny. I mean, you first mentioned it, and I thought, oh, yeah, we're not really teaching a lot of the foundational stuff. But honestly, as we're talking, I mean, I'm thinking back, it was primarily on the job training. I mean, we would send people to product training. Again, it was typically in person. I think a lot of it just has to do with the ability to provide a remote training now is, it's far more cost effective and more simple, to do it. I mean, it used to be you'd have to set up like a studio and have proper cameras. And
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it isn't like now we all have the tools that we need sitting right here, just like we do this podcast or when we have our meetings. But I don't. I guess I don't really think that the foundational training was really as big a part of the product trainings in the past. I feel like most of it was on the job.
sure,
And I
sure.
think the product training, like now, I think primarily focused on, understanding that product, what products they have, when you should use them, how to configure them, and all that sort of thing. But nobody really told you how to run the wire, or, when you
Yeah,
need conduit or not, or, what kind of ladder you're going to use or lift, or, just all these things. And the way that you learn that is just kind of to be a part of a crew that's
absolutely.
doing that work. And then, you learn it as you go, like most trades.
Yeah.
So now I'm back to
So
online. We're losing nothing.
I mean, yeah, I would say, for us, my takeaway from the online training is, what we've done here at Qumulex is we've provided a platform that speaks specifically to the products and services that we offer. There was definitely a gap there, both from the third-party products that we represent, just some, what I would call foundational knowledge. I'm not teaching people how to hang an enclosure, obviously, but what I am going through is just basic wiring of relays and inputs. I'm not explaining what a normally open, normally closed circuit is, but I am giving some examples, like when it came time to do the life safety power kits and, the FPO 150s, teaching fire alarm, activation circuits, just basic normally open circuit and what that looks like on this particular module and some of the interconnections. I think that is what I'm seeing in the marketplace. That was kind of like my segue, is what are we seeing other manufacturers do? It's really just training around their specific products, but they're not really getting into the and you got to keep it short and sweet, right? Like, I mean, if like our training, for example, I think if you're fast about it, it really only takes about, what would you say, 3-4 hours to get through?
I think we're up to
feels median right now in terms of other manufacturers and what they're offering.
Up to about 4 hours now, on our primary training. The new advanced access control, and it'll grow, but I think it's right around an hour right now. So I mean, if you took both trainings, I mean, you could still do that in a day for sure, and still take your time and really learn from it.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes you wonder. I mean, in the structured cabling industry, they have Bixby. And in addition to like the RCDD and some of those other things, I think what they're really known for is like the Bixby installer and technician, and where they actually go there for a week and run cable and label them and dress them in and terminate and test, and where they actually can learn a lot of those physical skills. When I think about ASAs and some of the security industry related, I mean, I think they focus more on like the design, like a PSP and understanding layers of security and all of that. I don't know that there really is like an independent authority for like send your security installers and they'll learn how to hang cameras and run wire and all of that. I can't think of one.
I mean, I know that
someone tell us if you know of one. I'm kind of curious.
I
think that should be promoted, but maybe that's an opportunity that somebody could come up with something there out there. Not me, I'm busy, but I mean, I wonder if people would use that if that were available.
Right. I mean, so speaking back to my integration days, we would literally go to those recruitment days at the local Lincoln Tech, which is a 2-year college, and these guys are training to be, electricians essentially. And what we found is those electricians absolutely made the best technicians, right? Because they were learning all those basic core concepts in that program and learning. I mean,
they learn some low voltage. I mean, a lot of it's like voice and data.
It's part of the curriculum now,
but there's a lot of commonality there. I mean, I think probably the biggest difference is when you get to the device, when you get to the edge device.
There's different tracks, like I didn't start off in that field. I was on the IT side. I was the guy who came in and loaded the software on the servers and programmed the network switches, and that was my introduction. So there's absolutely a multitude of paths of how you break in and how you learn.
I did that too. I learned how to pull cable on AS400s. Like that's that old IBM Type 2 that we later learned was not platinum braided. It was just cable. It's very, very heavy. It was shielded. These huge IBM connectors that you put on the end of it, and then you punched them in, basically snapped them into these bezels. So you had racks, but they're very inefficient. It's like a token ring type of network. But man, we started doing Cat 5, man. That was like nothing.
Yeah, right.
You've lifted a reel of IBM Type 2 cable. You've done something. That is not light. So that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, now we're just a couple of old grandpas talking on the computer. We went all the way back to token ring networks.
There's a English term that I just recently learned this week, geezer. We're a couple of geezers.
It's feeling that way. It's feeling that way. That's all right. Beats the alternative, right?
Right.
Well, this was good. Well, we
Yeah.
kind of picked a fluff topic today. We both had a very busy day and said we'll pick something easy. And somehow we ended up on the fact that we're old.
Yeah.
This was definitely a journey on this one all the way through. Well, that was good. Well, I guess what's our definitive answer? I'm right as always, online all the way, or what do we decide?
Course, no, I'm with you. I think there's advantages to in person, but it primarily resides around customer training and on their production system. And I very rarely see classroom instruction offered anymore. So I'm with you. I think online is the future. Online is where all the manufacturers are heading, and that's ultimately where their certification programs are based now. So
yeah.
My
final verdict will be this: if you're going to do it in person, you better make it worth it. Better be good.